Hello everybody, welcome back to History of Spriggs. My name is Spriggs, and today we'll be talking about Swedish colonization of the Americas. Well, with this, we'll be splitting this into categories. First, we have New Sweden, and then St. Barthélemy, and then Guadeloupe, and Essequibo, and that's all. And Tobago. So, we'll be talking about New Sweden. In 1638, Claes Larsen Fleming appointed Peter Minuit, former New Netherlands governor, to establish a colony in the Americas. And he passed Cape May and Cape Hennepin in late March 1638. Their goal was to establish a colony in the area around the Delaware River and the Delaware Bay, which was controlled by the Dutch at the time. And so, they entered through the mouth of the Delaware River, and as they sailed through Delaware Bay and Delaware River, they got to the mouth of the Christina River, which its mouth is at the Delaware River, at present-day Wilmington, Delaware. And they established a fort at the confluence of the Christina River and Brandywine Creek. And they named this fort Fort Christina after their queen, Christina. And so, following years, roughly 600 Swedes and Finns and a number of Dutch and a few Germans and a Dane and at least an Estonian settled in New Sweden. And Minuit served as the first governor of New Sweden and he had served as the third of New Netherlands. So he knew the state of the Dutch and a lot of other things about them, which came to the advantage, as you'll see later on. And so, he knew the Dutch claimed the area around the Delaware. However, he also knew that they were in a very weak state. And so, the Dutch also withdrew settlers from the area to focus on their colony on Manhattan Island, New Amsterdam, modern-day New York City. And they only had Fort Nassau on the west side of the Delaware River. And Minuit met with the chiefs of the Susquehannock and the Lenape tribes, or the Delaware tribes. And they said and the Swedes said that they bought the land from everywhere down to the Delaware Bay, all the way up the Schuylkill River, which is modern-day Philadelphia, both east and west sides of the Delaware River, which is a similar look to New Netherlands, which had basically all its land around the Hudson River in a strip. And so, now that the tribes recognized it, they established good relations with them, but the Dutch disapproved of this colony altogether. But Minuit knew, once again, the Dutch were in a weak military state, and so he ignored them, and he went to Stockholm to get more colonists for the colony of New Sweden. And he took a detour to the Caribbean to get tobacco to trade. But he died in a hurricane just off the coast of St. Christopher Island. Later, the colony thrived. Settlers were coming in, and compared to any colonial empire, if you think about the French tried to colonize and establish cities many, many times before they actually started to get a colony going. The English did it too. Most empires aren't started just snap like, well, they landed here and then they settled and made a colony and it thrived. But the Swedish did do this, which is very rare. And so the colony thrived, and they built Fort Nya Elfsborg and built Fort Nya Gothenburg. And that is in present-day Salem, New Jersey. And Fort Nya Gothenburg is in present-day Tinicum Island near Philadelphia. And they also established certain relations with Susquehannock people, and they supported the Susquehannock's raid of the Maryland colonists, which were English. And in 1651, the Dutch left Fort Nassau and built Fort Kashmir, 2 miles south of Fort Christina, which was the Swedish colony, the Swedish capital of the colony, New Sweden. And on May 1654, New Sweden sent soldiers, led by Governor Johan Rising, to Fort Kashmir, and took it and renamed it Fort Trinity. On November 1654, the Dutch planned to take New Sweden and sent Governor Peter Stuyvesant to drive them from the Delaware River and Bay area. In the summer of 1655, Stuyvesant led 7 ships, 317 men, to Fort Trinity and quickly took it, then besieged Fort Christina, and on September 15th, 1655, they took it, ending New Sweden. Although they remained pretty autonomous till the English took New Netherlands in 1664, and even after that, they were still pretty established, and they even, sort of settled in certain areas. And so, that's the end of New Sweden. Next is St. Barthélemy. The Swedish slave trade was small, but it was still a slave trade nonetheless. But when the Dutch took New Sweden, it ended. So in 1784, the French and Swedes struck a deal to open Gothenburg's port to the French, and Gothenburg is the second biggest city today in Sweden, and was a huge trading center. And if they did, the French would give them St. Barthélemy Island. And it worked, but the island only had 1,000 people. And not really any tobacco or cotton plantations, which made the colony pretty useless. And it didn't also have a significant trading area. It was more 1,000 people scattered throughout the island. And then, so, the king established a new town, and it was named Gustava after the king. In a year, the population doubled. It thrived, and it also benefited from the Napoleonic Wars, although the British occupied it from 1801 to 1802. The colony continued to grow, but it declined in population and shipping due to other islands and other things of such. And so the British so on March 16th, 1875, they sold it to the French. And so that was the end of St. Barthélemy. And so then, during the it's now Guadeloupe. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British captured Guadeloupe from the French, and since Sweden supported France's enemies, they gave it to them in 1813. And but in 1814, the Treaty of Paris was signed, ceding it back to the French in 1732. The Swedish settled in the Essequibo region. By the way, I transitioned to the Essequibo region. In the present-day Barmawani regions of Guyana. But in 1737, Spanish forces led by Major Sergeant Carlos Francisco Francois Sucre y Pardo destroyed them. In Tobago, the Swedish tried to settle the island, and the British kicked them out. The two last ones are pretty straightforward. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And please subscribe and share this video with a friend. If they don't listen, share it with an enemy. Also, like it. And with that being said, Spriggs out.